using different methods. And we have 2 more sections that we will be doing with solving quadratic equations, the one we're working on, and then 1 more section. So today and tomorrow, we'll go over the different types of quadratic equations and how to solve them using the square root process. So the goal today will be to work through some problems using these square roots to help us solve. And then we're going to work through some problems from the homework together, also using square roots to solve. So I'll do a group of problems with you from the notes. Mr. King will go through a group of problems from the homework.
Yeah.
So that by the end of the period, you should understand how to solve today's type of quadratic equation. And you should also have a good number of those problems complete. So if you could please take out the notes, if you have that paper copy. So we're still on section 5.6, solving quadratic equations by finding square roots. If you have the digital copy, it is page 33. What is the paper copy? Oh, big yawn, Bill. Page 49. So the paper copy is page 49.
Which is a perfect square.
Oh, how about that? So we're looking at page 49.
Yeah. Perfect square.
Or digitally, it's page 33, depending on the version that you have. When I turned 36, I was really excited to be turning a perfect square. And I told my students that I was turning a perfect square. And the one girl was like, oh my gosh, you're turning 49? I was like, do I look like I'm 49? Seriously? I was turning 36.
Ouch.
She's like, wow, you're turning 49. That's exciting. It's like, boy, I look that old to you, I guess.
You should say
I don't look 49.
64.
I mean, I'm no longer 36, but I'm not 49 either. I was not happy with her. She didn't get a passing grade that day. It's like, geez, that's the first perfect square that came to your mind. 49? Okay. All right. So as you can see in example 1, we have equations that we're going to solve, and we're going to start off pretty easy, straightforward. But we're going to start off with some steps first. So solving a quadratic equation, a couple of short little steps that we're going to talk about. And step number 1 is to isolate the x squared term. No longer is it an x by itself, but now we're trying to get x squared by itself. Isolate means get it by itself. It's just a fancy way of saying get it by itself. So to solve a quadratic equation, we have to isolate x squared. But now, because it's x squared, we have to do something to get x by itself, because when you're solving for x, it's supposed to be x equals. We are going to take the square root of both sides of the equation. That's going to be the method that we use to get x by itself. So we're going to get x squared by itself first, but then we still have to solve for x. And in order to do that, we're going to be taking the square root of both sides of the equation. When it's an equation, we need to be equivalent. So what you do to one side, we have to now make sure we're doing to the other. The final step is going to be a new part where we'll talk about. We are going to add a plus or minus to the solution. All answers will have a plus or minus, and we usually write it as plus and then a minus underneath. So you'll see a plus sign and a minus sign. Our answers are going to be both positive and negative solutions. And I want to talk about that part for just a second here. So if I have 3 squared, Phil, 3 squared is, no, just what's 3 times 3? 3 squared, 3 times 3, 9. If I have negative 3 squared, negative 3 times negative 3 is still 9. So that plus or minus means a positive 3 or a negative 3 still gives me the same answer of 9. So if I square a positive or square a negative, both those still give me the same answer. So that's what that plus or minus means. And we'll be writing that in our solutions. So we're going to see if we can solve these first 3 equations, which are considered really one-step equations to isolate the x squared. And then they get a little more interesting in the second group. But look at the first example. We have x squared plus 1 equals 13. Peyton, how would you get the x squared by itself? So here is x squared. How do you think you would isolate that or get it by itself? What could you take away from it to move to the other side? What number is next to it right now? A 1. And what are you doing with that 1? Adding it. There you go. So the opposite of addition is subtraction. So this plus 1 right now is with x squared. It's being added. In order to take it to the other side, we have to subtract it.
It's just like solving for x.
So it is the same steps as solving for x. So 1 minus 1 cancels. You still have an x squared, but now Peyton, 13 minus 1 is 12. So the first step of solving is to isolate the x squared term. That means x squared should be by itself, and it is, because now it just says, whoops, sorry, whoopsies. There we go. Now it says x squared is equal to 12. The second step says take the square root of both sides of the equation. Our goal is just to have x, and right now it's x squared. To get x squared to just become x, we do the opposite. And the opposite of something squared is to take the square root of it. So we're going to take the square root of x squared, but because it's an equation, what I do to one side, I must do to the other. So on the left, the square root of x squared, think of these as canceling each other out. So the square power and the square root symbol cancel and get x by itself. Because the square root of x squared is just x. Because x times x makes x squared. On the other side, we have the square root of 12. This is where we were doing that work with perfect squares. So the problem isn't done because we have to do something with that square root of 12. And we're going to simplify it. So remember our perfect squares. Go up to 100. Emma, how could you break down the square root of 12 with one of the perfect squares? So which one of these numbers divides into 12? 4. So it has to be less than 16. 9 doesn't go into 12, but 4 does. So this is now what we did yesterday and Monday and Tuesday. So the square root of 12 becomes the square root of 4. And Emma, 4 times what makes 12? 3. So Emma, the square root of 4 becomes 2, and then we have the square root of 3. So we isolated x squared. We then took the square root of both sides. But taking the square root means that square root needs to be simplified. To simplify it, 4 times 3 is 12. The square root of 4 becomes 2. So notice your answer looks like the problems that we were working on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. The last part is to place a plus or minus sign in front. Let me make that look a little neater. So a plus or minus. That's going to go in front of every single problem because two positives make a positive, but two negatives multiplied together still make a positive number. So every answer is a plus or minus because I can have two answers when there is x squared. So x squared means two answers for x, one that's positive and one that's negative. Just like when we were factoring, we always had two parentheses with x. All right, let's try the next one. I know this is a little different. So look at B, and we're going to see if we can apply the same process to B. So Jason, what would you do first to get the x squared by itself? Yeah, so we're going to subtract 2. So the 2's cancel, and Jason, you end up having x squared equals 34. So that's step 1. Step 2, take the square root of both sides of the equation. So now we're going to come in and take the square root of both sides of the equation. The reason we're doing that is because we need the square and the square root to cancel. So if I had 3 times x, I would divide by 3 to get the x by itself. Well, the way you get a square or a squared by itself is by taking the square root. Our whole goal is to solve for x. On the other side, we have the square root of 34. So looking at my list of perfect squares, 34 is less than 36. Do any of the numbers above 36 divide into 34? Peyton says no. The only numbers that go into 34 are 1 and 34 and 2 and 17. None of those are perfect squares in the list. So that means the answer does not simplify and it stays as the square root of 34. Sometimes square roots don't simplify. The last part of the answer is to put the plus or minus symbol in front. And that's there because I could take a positive times a positive and still get a positive answer, or a negative times a negative and still get a positive answer. Mr. King, a different way to explain that?
No.
No.
No, I mean, it's,
So you always have 2 answers when it's x squared. So look at that, like the power of 2 means 2 answers for all of my problems.
Yep.
And when we factored, we always had 2 factors, x plus 2, x minus 2. So it's having those 2 answers for the problems. All right, let's look at one more in this group. Haley, what would you do to get x squared by itself? Yeah, minus 3. What is 21 minus 3? 18. All right. So then the next step, take the square root. So Haley, when I take the square root of x squared, we just end up with x. All right, Haley, we're looking at 18. Is there a perfect square that goes into 18? It would be 9 and 2. So this one gets simplified. Haley, the square root of 9 becomes, and then we have the square root of 2. So the answer here is x equals, don't forget the plus or minus 3 square root of 2. Questions? All right, so we're going to continue working with the next set. We're just going to add a little step to it. So looking at the next group of problems, again, solve the equation. So we're trying to solve for x squared. We have 4x squared equals 108. Jason, what do you think you would do to get x squared by itself? Yeah, divide by 4. So instead of it being x squared plus 4, it's now 4 times x squared. The opposite of multiplication is division. So the process of solving the equation hasn't changed. We still isolate the variable using the same steps. Jason, do you know what 108 divided by 4 is? 27. So x squared is by itself. Then we take the square root of both sides to just get x. Jason, what goes into 27? 9 and 3. So x equals what, Jason? What's the square root of 9 become? And then square root 3. Good job. So plus or minus 3 square root 3. All right, how are we doing? Okay, questions? Okay, so let's look at letter B. This one is a two-step equation. So think about if it just said 3x minus 5, what would you do to solve? Emma, what do you think you would do first? Add 5. So the 5's cancel. It's 3x squared equals what, Emma? 60. Now it's like the problem we just did in A. So Emma, how do you get x squared by itself? Divide by 3. What is 60 divided by 3? Nice, 20. Now what do you do, Emma? So we square root both sides. And you use 5 and 4. So square root, let's write the 4 first. Square root 4, square root 5. And then Emma, what's that answer become? Yeah, so 2 square root 5. And then don't forget that plus or minus in front. Every single one of them. After you take the square root, there are 2 answers for x. Questions? So TJ, letter C. What would you do first with letter C? Yeah. So let's take that 13 to the other side. So negative 2x squared. TJ, do you know what negative 43 minus 13 is? If they were both positive, what would, there you go, perfect. Nice job, negative 56. And then TJ, what would you do? Divide by negative 2. What is negative 56 divided by negative 2? Anybody, do you have a calculator, TJ? Yeah, 28. All right, now take the square root of both sides. We got x squared by itself. Here's 28 in between 25 and 36. We need one of those numbers to divide into 28. Bill, what goes into 28? 4 and 7. So what does your answer become then, Bill? Excellent. So plus minus 2 square root 7. Questions? All right. So we're not doing the next group because the next group of problems change. They look a little different. Today's problems are just on these type of equations. So we're going to stop there and we're going to just go directly to Google Classroom. And we're going to practice more problems using the homework that's posted. So we're not taking any more notes today, but instead we're going to go to Google Classroom. And we're going to open up that worksheet that is posted. Here it is. So you can decide if you want to do evens or odds. I'll let you pick.
I'll do even Stevens.
So Mr. King said we're doing the even. So if you want to cross off the odds, we'll work through the even problems, some of those even problems.
And the other thing we're gonna need to do is make our perfect square list. Bill, can you tell me all the perfect squares? Yep. Four, 169, 196, and 225. All right. So let's look at a pretty tough one here. Let's look at number 10. We have -5 times x squared equals -500. Haley, what's the first step going to be? How do we get x by itself? Yeah, divide -5 to both sides. What do you get when you do that? Huh? 100. Good. Now what's the next step? Yeah, square root both sides. And then you get x equals, and then you said the answer already. 10. What do we need to put in front? And this is a perfect example to start with because -10 times -10 gives you 100, and 10 +10 times +10 gives you 100. So that shows you that there's two answers. Very good. Let's look at 12 below. Peyton, what's the first step going to be? It's very similar to 10. You divide by -2. What do you get when you divide by -2? Good, not negative, but good. And then next step is? Good. You said square root. And what do you get your answer to be? Not just 9, but yeah, positive or negative. Both answers. Very, very good. Now we'll just finish it up here. Anya, what would we do for 14? TJ, what would we do for 14 here? Divide, good. So when you divide, what do you get? Does that work out evenly? No. Do you want me to get the radical out of the denominator?
No.
It's okay to leave it in there. Okay.
It'll work out okay. It'll be all right.
Good. So you cannot simplify here, right? Or can you? No. So you get 49 over 16. And then what do you do next, TJ? Take the Yeah, the square root. And we can use something, the quotient property, where you get the square root of 49 on top and then the square root of 16 on the bottom. TJ, what is the square root of 49? Yeah, what's the square root of 16? So you get 7/4. And then what do you have to put in front of that? Just like every problem. It could be either positive or negative. Good. So plus minus 7/4. Very good. I don't know why I was thinking 16 wasn't a perfect square. Okay, I definitely want to go over number 18 with you. It's a two-step equation we have here. Think of like n squared as just being an n. You look back when we were doing this a couple weeks ago. How do we get n by itself? So what's the first step? Not yet. Opposite of plus 2 is? Good, so you're going to subtract 2 first. When you do so, you get 10 n squared equals 290. And then now what do you do, Phil? When you divide by 10, these zeros cross off, so you get n squared equals 29. And then what do we do next? The root of both sides. Good. Does a perfect square go into 29? So you could try them all out. 25, 16, 9, 4. Do any of those go in there evenly? No. Because 29 is a prime number. So you get the square root of 29, and then what do we have to put in front, Bill? Plus minus, that's it. Really good. So 20 is the same way. It's a two-step equation first. Haley, what do we do first then to solve the n squared? So 10s, what's left? Good, what's next? We'll divide by 9 on both sides. Good. Good, and then? Forget that plus or minus. Oh, that was 9 up there. Good. Let's go to 28. It's a tough one because we don't have the n squared first. What's the first step we're going to do here? You got it. Subtract 3 from both sides. When we subtract 3, what's left? Negative 4x squared equals negative, you said 88. What's next step? Good. What does x squared equal? What's the next step? There's a big delay on the.
Yeah.
Come on, Apple TV, you can do it. Apple TV is moving like pond water. Okay, we take the square root. Keep talking to me. Keep talking to me. We'll figure this out. We'll get it working. Okay, when you take the square root, you have x squared equals 22. Is there a perfect square that goes into 22? No. So what's your final answer? x equals plus or minus the square root of 22. Yeah, that was a good, tough one to do. Hey, look at 26. What would be the first step we're going to do? Add 7. What's left? Next step. Good. What is 200 divided by 8? Yeah. So you have b squared equals 25. What do you do next? Good. And what do you get for your final answer? Yeah. Looks like you guys are getting it good. So I'm going to leave you. I mean, you have plenty of time. 7 minutes. So you 7 minutes. I think you only have what, 7 problems left? Yeah, 7 problems, 7 minutes. So you can
Submit the assignment when you have it done.
leave.
You didn't take the quiz yesterday. Please make sure you take the quiz. Should not take you more than 15 minutes
Yes.
max. And it involves the simplifying square root. which is gonna be work. If you did take the quiz, it has been scored and placed in PowerSchool.
Your homeworks are all updated as well. So Power School should be totally updated.
Yes, yeah. So once you take the square root of 36, the answer is just not the square root of 6. But taking the square root of it.
What's going on over here? Big
Um,
tarps.
There are chairs underneath those tarps. They're having the middle school students come over for a building
Oh, yeah.
tour.
Oh yeah, I've been seeing them.
And I guess at the end of the tour, the band plays for them.
Oh,
and they set everything up out there.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Oh, I've been seeing.
so there's chairs underneath there that they'll set up at the end of the day in there.
There it is. There it is. Almost probability time, my favorite.
Mhm.
My favorite.
Have a fantastic day.
All right, Miss Kane.